Hello and welcome to this week's Citizens Climate University, a weekly CCL training program designed to connect CCL volunteers throughout the country and the larger world with effective tools and resources for becoming climate advocates. Tonight's training is on extreme heat and climate change resources. Join us to learn from Dr. Kristina Dahl, a co-author of the recent Union of Concerned Scientists report titled Killer Heat in the United States: Climate Choices and the Future of Dangerously Hot Days. Dr. Dahl will be reviewing the main findings of the report, the importance of communicating local impacts from climate change, as well as how to use the Union of Concerned Scientists' new tool, where you can see an estimated number of extreme heat days for cities and counties in the US where you live in your own local outreach and meetings. All right, so with that, let me warmly welcome Dr. Dahl and give a quick background behind her work. Kristina Dahl is a senior climate scientist for the Climate and Energy Program at the Union of Concerned Scientists. In her role, she designs, executes, and communicates scientific analyses to make climate change more tangible to the general public and to policymakers. Her research focuses on the impact of climate change, particularly sea level rise, on peoples and places. Much of Christie's work involves spatial analysis and products reflecting her lifelong passion for maps, and prior to joining UCS, Dr. Dahl was the Associate Director of a school-wide climate change initiative at Rutgers University and provided scientific guidance as a core scientist for the American Museum of Natural History's Seminars on Science program. So to get us there tonight, Dr. Dahl will start with a background of why this analysis was done and how it was conducted. She'll then review a little science behind the heat index, as well as some of the staggering findings for mid and late century predictions should no action on climate change be taken, and then really highlight some of the key takeaways from the report. We'll then have a chance to ask her questions, and I'll close tonight by reviewing where you can find some of CCL's additional local impact resources on CCL Community. So let's get started.
Hi everybody, it's great to be presenting our Killer Heat report to all of you volunteers for CCL. We're really excited to share this information with you and to see where you take it in your activism and in your volunteering. So the report I'll be talking about, we published back in July. It's called Killer Heat in the United States. And it's an examination of how the frequency of extreme heat is projected to change as climate change progresses. So I'll be sharing with you some of the motivation of that work, as well as some of the results, as well as some information about resources that we have available to people like you who want to take this information out into the world. So for anyone who's not familiar with UCS, we are a science-based organization that advocates for using sound science to inform public policy. Our overall goal is to produce science that helps to make our planet healthier and our world safer. We have about 200 people on staff, but we also have a network of over 20,000 scientists worldwide who we work with to help to promote science-based public policy. So we wanted to examine extreme heat because it has such severe consequences for our health. The image I'm showing here is the heat index forecast for late July, when much of the US was experiencing a massive heat wave. During heat waves, we see spikes in visits to ERs, like is described in this quote from an emergency room physician from Michigan, saying that they had seen a spike in ER visits in the past several weeks. It's been huge. They've been admitting people left and right. This heat wave was also deadly. It took the lives of several people in Maryland. So we know that extreme heat is already having consequences. We know from past studies that it's been growing worse. And what we wanted to do was look into the future so people could see these changes coming and have a chance to take action. So what we did is we looked at very high resolution climate models. We used 18 of them and took the average, so it's not just from one model. We used temperature and humidity data from those models to calculate the heat index. And then we looked at how the heat index would change with 3 different scenarios for how our greenhouse gas emissions could evolve over the course of the century. And then we broke the data down so that we have information for literally every community in the lower 48, so every city and every county. So no matter where you are, we have data to provide you with that you can take to your local elected officials or representatives so that you can ask them questions about what their plans are for extreme heat in the future. To back up just a moment, the heat index is a combination of temperature and relative humidity. And many of you are probably familiar with this. It's what the National Weather Service calls the feels like temperature. Basically, when the humidity is high, it's harder for our bodies to cool themselves by sweating. And so it feels hotter than the temperature reading on your thermometer. So for example, if you have a temperature of 90 degrees Fahrenheit and a relative humidity of 60%, the feels like temperature or the heat index is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So the heat index is what we were quantifying in this study. And we also hit upon an interesting and really novel idea, which is that there is an upper limit to what the National Weather Service can calculate with the heat index. It wasn't designed to go beyond the range of conditions we've typically had on Earth. But increasingly, as we experience global warming, we'll find ourselves in this black zone here that's labeled off the charts. And this is where there's a temperature and relative humidity combination that's so high that it exceeds the formulas that the National Weather Service uses to calculate heat index. So with these types of conditions, we can't really calculate how hot it feels, and we can't adequately warn people about what it's going to be like for their bodies. So we quantified the frequency of these off-the-charts conditions in the future as well. These are the three scenarios that we looked at in terms of how our greenhouse gas emissions would change in the coming decades. We looked at a no action scenario in the red line here, where our emissions continue to rise through the end of the century. A slow action scenario where emissions rise through the middle of the century and then start to drop off. And what we call a rapid action scenario, which is a scenario in which we swiftly and aggressively reduce our emissions so that we can limit future global warming to 2 degrees Celsius, or about 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a snapshot of what we found for the mid-century time frame. So this is a time frame that's an average over the years 2036 to 2065. What we found in this time frame is that even this is within most of our lifetimes, we would see a steep increase in the frequency of extreme heat. The maps here are showing the number of days per year that would have a heat index above 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the top row, or 105 degrees Fahrenheit in the bottom row. We're comparing historical conditions on the left and those mid-century conditions in the no action scenario on the right. So what you can see with both of these pairs of maps is that both the frequency of extreme heat increases and its intensity increases as well. So nationwide, we found that days with a heat index above 100 would roughly double by mid-century with this scenario, and days with a heat index above 105 would roughly triple. What that means for a place like, let's say Springfield, Illinois, kind of in the central part of Illinois, that it would go from having 10 or less days with a heat index above 105 historically to having something between 25 and 50 of those days per year. So that's a really steep increase in extreme heat. We basically see hot places getting much hotter and having much more severe heat. And then places where there hasn't historically been extreme heat, like northern New York or most of New England, starting to experience this heat for the first time. Nationwide, in that mid-century time frame, we find that there are 150 cities that would experience 30 or more days with a heat index above 105. For historical context, there are only 3 cities that have typically experienced that frequency of extreme heat conditions in the US. And those are the the three cities here that look sort of like target symbols in Southern California and Arizona. So you can imagine the type of heat that those places experience would be spreading to 150 cities across the nation and as far north as places like Missouri. When we look at the late century time frame, with this no action scenario, we find unprecedented levels of heat across the US. So here we're looking at the frequency of days with a heat index above 105 in the top map, and then the frequency of those off the charts conditions in the bottom map. If we look at just the bottom map for a minute, historically, these off the charts conditions have only occurred for a couple of days per year in the Sonoran Desert regions. That's right along the Southern California-Arizona border. But you can see that by this late century time frame, over half of the US would be experiencing these conditions on an annual basis. And in places like Eastern Texas, there could be between 10 and 25 of these off the charts days in an average year. So that's heat that's not just unprecedented for that region, but unprecedented for anywhere in the US. The good news about our study is that we found very, very profound differences between the no action scenario that I've been describing and that rapid action scenario where we work hard to limit our emissions and limit future warming to 2 degrees Celsius. So the no action scenario is shown on the left here. Again, these are cities that would experience 30 or more days with a heat index above 105. And we look at the rapid action scenario on the right. So just visually, you can tell that there are many fewer cities that would experience this, this really oppressive level of extreme heat. In the no action scenario, it's about 290 cities. And in the rapid action scenario on the right, it's about 85 cities. So 85 is still a major increase from the 3 cities that experience that level of heat historically. But it's a far cry from places like Michigan experiencing 30 or more days with a heat index of 105, like we see in the no action scenario on the left. So the big takeaways from our study are that failing to take action to reduce emissions would lead to a staggering expansion of dangerous heat. But aggressively reducing our emissions could contain that expansion and keep much of our country recognizable and safe for future generations. But the time to act is now. We have a narrowing window in which to reduce our emissions in order to not exceed that 2 degrees Celsius threshold. So really the time to act is now. We have a number of resources available if you're interested in taking this information out there in the world to your local elected officials or asking your candidates about it. And I'll describe some of those in the next few slides. All of this information is available online in a bunch of different formats, depending on how you want to ingest it. So if you go to ucsusa.org/killerheat, you'll see a link to interactive maps like the one shown on the left. These maps let you explore county level data. You click on any county and it'll bring up statistics about how the frequency of extreme heat will change for that location in the future. And you can explore all those different scenarios that I described as well. We also have an interactive data widget at that website, same website, where you just type in your location, choose your heat index threshold. You can see the number of days above 90 or 100, 105, or those off the charts conditions. Just hit and go will return the data for you so you can see how conditions would change by mid or late century, or how much of an improvement we would see if we limit future warming with that with the rapid action scenario, excuse me. We also have spreadsheets with all the data if you really want to dig into it. And we have an interactive map that will direct you to a fact sheet that's specific for your congressional district. Those are available in English or in Spanish. So there are a lot of resources to help you to take this information and make it available to your community or make it available to your elected officials or candidates. And we hope that you will take advantage of that and raise your voice if this is an issue that you care about. So I think I'll stop there. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to get in touch with us at UCS. We're happy to field questions or help you find the information that you're looking for. Thank you.
Bravo, bravo. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is exactly what we were hoping for, Kristy, and being able to highlight so succinctly how we can best use this tool in our own outreach and understand its impacts. I'm just going to ask you a couple questions that we've gotten here from the audience, and we would love your thoughts on all three of these. So the first one is it still powerful to share this report outside of the hot summertime months?
Yeah, I would say that people generally tend to be more concerned about extreme heat in the summer, just like right now we're concerned more about hurricanes because it's hurricane season. But I think it's important to help people to remember what we've experienced this summer. Many people who are interested in this information probably live in places that experienced that massive heat wave in July and remember what it was like. So
excellent. And what do you recommend as far as, could you provide an example communication of how you might share this report in a meeting yourself?
If you're talking to people about this, you can say, you know, remember that heat wave that we had back in July and how hot it was, and mention what it felt like for you, what it felt like for your family and friends. And say, you know, there's a study that projects that heat like that will become much more frequent in the future. So I think if we can all kind of cast ourselves back to the conditions we experienced, you know, those are pretty memorable. And so hopefully will help people to engage with the topic even when it's not hot out.
All right, and then the last question we have is, how would you recommend communicating the science behind this study to a general lay audience?
So I'd start by saying that this isn't just a UCS report. We also published a peer-reviewed paper in the scientific literature. So the methods that we've used in this study have been vetted by the scientific community, and that's important because it means that these results are credible and they can be trusted. What we did in this study was use climate models that are already very well established and have also been published. And we analyzed different greenhouse gas emission scenarios. Those have also been previously published and are used by thousands of scientific studies. So the methodology that we've used here has undergone many checks along the way. And it's nothing that should come as a surprise to anyone scientifically. So the very basics of what we did is we used 18 different climate models, and we ran those models with different scenarios of how our emissions could change. And then we looked at how the heat index would change in response to those greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you again for joining us, Dr. Dahl, today. To close, I'd love to highlight, if this type of research is helpful and these types of tools that really are gearing in on highlighting the local impacts that your community faces is something that you're interested in, this extreme heat resource that Kristina has highlighted tonight will be joining the rest of the local impacts category on CCL Community. You can see the URL listed here on the slide, and we'll just highlight that you can find out information about news media coverage of climate change with climate signals. You can find out about surging sea levels with the Risk Finder tool, clean energy progress in your state data map that shows constituent polling and other information around what your state is currently facing, as well as other local impacts and climate opinions with all of these tools. Just go to the homepage of Community, and then on this resources and training drop-down menu, click on that and then the all resources option. And then scroll down, you'll see some of the resources by categories. It's right here. It's called Local Impacts, and you can see all of these are directoried here. If you're curious, just type in community.citizensclimate.org/resources #local-impacts to find out more. With that, if anyone has questions or suggestions for further resources to explore local impacts, please feel free to reach out and share in the CCL forums. That URL is provided here. It's a wonderful repository of the wisdom of the crowds, of all of the work that CCL leaders across the country and larger world are doing. And with that, we want to thank you for joining us tonight. We hope you found this training useful, and we look forward to hearing how you've been using this tool in your own outreach. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.